All right, for our second topic of segment 2 today, we are going to look over the Q&A. And the Q&A is all about horror factor. This entire issue is basically about horror in one way or the other. And so it just is fitting that, there are a lot of questions about horror factor. Like, why does my stupid Cenobite Nightbane, I got a 22. Why can't I keep my 22? Why you tell me I got to cap that baby out at 18? If I'm that scary, I should be that scary. That's right. God's run away from me. Maybe we'll find out. This I was going to say episode, but in this segment here. And I'm sure somebody's going to put in the comments, it's because I don't care why. I have a 22 and I'm sticking to that. Keen Luck should be shaking his head right now if he's not. Well,
no. I mean, I agree. I agree. If you have a horror factor of 22, awesome.
You just can't talk to anybody ever.
In the rules, I would say it's actually 18, but they get a -4 to save.
There you go. No, to be fair, I get it. Look, there's always got to be a chance that somebody can make it through it. I get it. I just thought it was fun that I rolled a 22. Okay, so we got the intro here. We don't care about the intro. We just want to start asking questions. Can someone with night vision see someone who is using shadow meld? Oh, I guess this one isn't about horror factor. What about infrared thermal imaging? Answer, no. Someone with night vision cannot see someone who is merged into a shadow. Advanced optic systems like infrared and thermal imaging can. Isn't that what night vision? No, night vision would be low light. Okay, yeah. However, and they are the only way to reveal a character magically hidden in the shadows. So infrared and thermal imaging are the only way that you can see somebody magically hidden in shadows.
All right.
Are there any possible modifications to horror factor? I can just read it off here. I don't need that minimized anymore. The listed horror factor for monsters and some effects like thunderclap can indeed be modified based on circumstances. Now, this is one of those questions that I understand why it has to be asked, but I also hate it at the same time. I don't know when it happened that game masters don't feel inclined to adjust. Yeah, I think that's the right word. Adjust rules, adjust modifiers based on circumstance. It just boggles my mind when I see a question like that, but I also know that the vast majority of people have these questions, so they've got to answer them. Seeing a dragon, even a hatchling, approaching at a distance should be less frightening than suddenly coming face to face with one. Likewise, seeing some monsters eat, or even at play, may be enough to raise the effective horror factor for an encounter. What are they playing with? I don't know. That's a human baby.
They're playing catch with their mouths using human baby parts.
Right.
Horror factor.
Yeah.
Oh, well, if you're a human.
In addition, an especially ancient, wicked, ruthless, powerful, otherwise augmented creature may have 1 to 4 higher horror factor than is the norm because he's so much more fearsome or frightening. I think I've just gone with it there because it is, at that point, you're an it. Yeah. If you got that much horror factor, I don't even want to give you he or she. You're an it.
No.
Apply common sense and drama when using and modifying horror factor. Again, it's just weird to me that this question, but I'm glad it's here. Just to reiterate, you as the game master, just be fair, consistent, and reasonable. Those are the three rules you have when you make modifications like that. Fair, consistent, and reasonable. Generally, the less one is prepared, the greater the horror factor involved. This means, as a game master, you should feel free to raise horror factor by 1 to several points, or depending on circumstances, lower it. If you're going in, okay, you've never seen a boogeyman before. But you know what you're going, you're prepared, you've researched them in the encyclopedias or the computers, whatever. You understand that you've seen that picture written in the book, hiding in the closet. When you get to it and finally see it, it's still going to be creepy. I don't care who you are. I've seen lots of bugs in my life in pictures. When I see one in real life, it's still creepy to me, okay? It is what it is. But maybe not quite as creepy once I know more about it. I actually find I like dragonflies. I think they're awesome. Dragonflies don't bother me in the slightest for some odd reason. Yet, I cry like a little girl when it's a sewer bug. What actually has the potential of hurting me more?
Dragonfly.
Yet I have no. So, but there's still a little bit of horror factor there if I'm not prepared for it, right? So yeah, absolutely. If you studied up on it, there should still be a horror factor rule, but you're probably going to get a bonus. It all depends on the circumstance. Note, however, that such an increase or decrease in horror factor is likely to only be temporary. The initial shock has a greater horror factor than prolonged exposure. After a melee round or two, the horror factor is likely to return to normal, especially if you see it do something weird, man. The exception is a specific character whose horror factor is higher because of his reputation, the way he carries himself, or appearance. Yet, even despicable, horror-looking monsters can be accepted by others. I mean, what? In this case, familiarity and friendship overcome appearances and reputation as the character come to believe they know, trust, and like said individual. Thus, while strangers, this is Beauty and the Beast thing, okay? Thus, while strangers may see a frightening monster, they only see their buddy, Bob. I still see a monster. However, friendship and familiarity go a long way when the horrific creature gets angry, loses control in combat, feeds, gets possessed or mind control, and turns on the player group or some innocent victim. Again, it's a matter of circumstance and common sense. You know what an old movie kind of exemplifies this?
What's that?
Harry and the Hendersons. The family was okay with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another situation in which horror factor may be lowered is if the adventurers are facing a group of monsters and kicking them behind with ease. The horror, at least against this group, will lessen as the heroes become confident in themselves, perhaps overconfident. Of course, that's when the GM brings in the bad guy's heavy hitter or champion or a metamorphosing demon or some such. It could be the opposite too. That horror factor could rise if it keeps kicking your butt. Even if it's just lucky die rolls. This thing is not what you thought it was going to be. I would caution you about overdoing that, modifying it constantly. Oh, because of this. Oh, because that. But the idea that you can and possibly even should in certain circumstances, I think, is the important thing there. What are your thoughts?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What are the people in
I think that is reserved for, say, lieutenants or bosses in the campaign where something will change. They will become more disgusting or more frightening because of a spell or a physiological effect or whatever, and then you would have to roll a different horror factor at that point. It should not be common.
Yeah, I agree with
very
that.
Uncommon, as a matter of fact, but it should be something that the characters experience sooner or later.
If I took a creature and then gave it an extra power that you weren't prepared for, I think that's a good way to bump up the horror factor. If it's got a crazy power that, let's say acidic, it dissolves you, but it squirts on you and only does, it's supposed to do 66 damage and somehow comes out with 6. I could see that in subsequent rounds that maybe it's lessened for that character. Oh, this thing isn't so tough. Or like Heathen Duck said, use it sparingly. Go ahead.
Yeah, or on the other side, the thing you're fighting has a horror factor of, say, 10, and everyone saved against it because you're strong, you're tough, your mental fortitude is up there, but it has an ability where it summons bugs from the ground to cover it in a kind of carapace armor.
So my horror factor, I failed. I don't even care. I failed. I'm not rolling.
Yeah, you wouldn't even have to roll. It's like, I'll just run away. No, but now it's horror factor 16 because you saw that crap happen.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, nope, I don't like that. I don't like that at all. That's when you have to roll again. Yeah. Now, again, do not make that common.
Right.
But when it does happen, it's going to be memorable.
Especially if they weren't prepared for it.
Time.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. 16, and then somebody in comments is going to quibble over 16. Who cares? 12, 16, 14, what? 5. Okay, 5 lowers it. But you get what I'm saying. But raise it to some meaningful degree if that happens. Yeah, I could see that. All right. Can horror factor be applied to things other than monsters? Well, definitely. Some spells such as fear have an area effect horror factor. Likewise, in a stressful situation, a thunderclap, explosion, or even somebody dropping a book with a thud may startle a character and pose a horror factor-like response. I will give you a real-world example. When I came back from Korea, because some weird things happened when I was in Korea, I came back July 11th, I think it was, and the neighbors lit off fireworks. I was sitting in the lazy boy watching TV. I dove to the ground. My mom still laughs about me doing that. That was back in 1995. My mom still laughs about that to this day. Now, would I do that today? No, but I did then. That was a horror factor like response. I sometimes think that people look at horror factor and get caught up on those words, horror factor. Well, it has to be an ugly, evil monster or a creature from the abyss, and that's the only time that it can come into play. No, it's anything that kind of startles you into a fight or flight.
Yeah, if it's so disturbing to you that it overrides your thought process and you react on base instinct, then it's a horror factor roll.
Yep. You could easily were you done? Sorry.
Yeah.
You could easily apply such horror factors over entire vicinities as general creepiness. For example, an old haunted house may have an ambient horror factor of 8 or 10. Anyone failing this role be hesitant to enter or go into a particular room. I could see. Depends on how big it is. I probably wouldn't want to roll for every single room, but maybe like once per floor, or after a crazy event, like a poltergeist just threw a typewriter across the room or something. Uh-oh.
All of the 80s horror movies where the people walk in and the house like gives them so many hints and clues that this is a bad place. Like, you walk into a room and the wind whispers, "Get out," and they stay. Or the walls start leaking, looks like blood. You're like, "Oh, I have to get that looked at." I'm like, what are you, stupid?
Where are we here? So horror factor of 8 to 10. And any monsters within may have +1 to their horror factor in the appropriate circumstance. Similarly, strange alien environment, field of dead, graveyard, or other spooky, gruesome, and evil places might have an ambient horror factor, give whatever pops out of the shadows a momentary horror factor increase. Now,
that's what I would do. That's what if you are in a scary place, inherently scary to your character, everything that has a horror factor that comes has a bonus horror factor because of the ambiance. Like a zombie in a beautiful field filled with flowers, I think would have a lower horror factor than a zombie in a graveyard at night in a full moon.
And that you just turn around is like 6 inches from you.
Well, you want to add that, yeah, but I'm just saying the ambiance can add to the horror factor of something that already has an inherent horror factor.
Well, I was using that for the purposes of the pop, where you just turn and all of a sudden, Then there are other situations that might evoke horror and a horror factor response. The most common would be a life-threatening one, like disarming a bomb and not knowing for certain which wire to cut. It's funny how sometimes player characters just play into this, and game masters, instead of stopping time to give the player time to think, let that play as a horror factor response. Rounds are already pretty long in Palladium at 15 seconds. If the player's like, I don't know, I could do this. Let me look up this skill over here. That just tells me that the character isn't confident with his abilities, trying to think his way through it. That's just a natural horror factor. You don't even have to roll. He played right into it. Good job. Having to rush into a burning building or facing torture or leaping into the unknown. Horror factor is a great way, I guess, what would it be in D&D? Like some sort of fear check or no, what would it be? Wisdom check? Or saving throw, maybe? That's a great way to implement horror factor if you're not sure. Well, my character would do it. Well, great. I'll give you an MA bonus to the roll. Or I guess it'd be ME bonus to the roll. But I'm still going to have you roll horror factor to see if you really want. It's all well and good to say, I'd run into a fire to save my wife until you feel how hot it is and see how dark it is.
Yeah. You may love her, but you love yourself more.
So all these might, depending on the character and circumstance, have horror factor momentarily paralyze the character before he or she snaps out and takes action. And you know what? You might be like, so what? I didn't do something for a round. I didn't do something for 15 seconds. That, in a fight, that could change the entire nature of the battlefield.
Yeah, I mean, the effect of horror factor is that you lose actions. If you go last, or you're rocking in a corner, whatever. But the next round you recover. But that first round is very important, especially if your group is taken by surprise.
Yep. All right, when is a roll for horror factor applicable? Can you force multiple rolls in the one encounter? This is actually a good question because this does come up a lot. Mm-hmm. Generally, when a character is surprised, startled, or comes face to face with something hideous or horrible, horror factor should be rolled. This represents the fact that just coming face to face with the source of the horror factor has the chance to surprise, stun, or shock the character, even if he thought he was prepared. Aliens. Standing there with that, with the whole face, the inner face, just standing there like, you're probably sitting there, run, duck, dive, punch, shoot, something. And you're just like, that's a perfect example of a horror factor. Yeah. There are many things one thinks he can handle until faced with it. That is an amazing sentence. That's the moment of truth, and sometimes one is momentarily impaired by fear. Yes, the character can be made to roll against horror factor more than once in the same encounter, but only if another potentially surprising or horrible event happens or a creature appears, such as the monster swallowing the victim's blood or eating someone alive, or another one of the horrid things appears from around the corner.
Yeah.
And this is kind of like what he was saying.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. It's an alien. Fine. We got over that. It's just one alien. It's fine. And then suddenly you realize, oh, no, I'm not in the movie Alien. I'm in the movie Aliens. And then you roll horror factor again because now there's 40 of them.
Or you were stomping on the eggs, shooting up the eggs, lighting them on fire, and there are a couple of the soldiers or workers or whatever they are. But then you come across the queen.
Yeah, the queen is a different animal, and you're gonna have to roll again.
Yep. By the way, no IP infringement here. What about those racist characters which have good physical beauty statistic and horror factor? When should you roll?
Oh,
generally,
same thing. Yeah.
Same circumstances apply as above. There you go. When the character does something startling, evil, bloodthirsty, or horrific, the roll versus horror factor should be made. For example, a changeling revealing his true form or unexpectedly bumping into a wolf in a dark alley might evoke a horror factor response. Wait, what is... Can wolfen see through changelings or something?
No.
I guess it'd be the changeling would have to roll the horror factor because wolfen are big. Okay.
No, these are two different examples.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
Or, for example, changing his true form, or you unexpectedly bumping into a wolfen. I would have wrote the you in there for clarification, but I get it now. Okay. Again, it depends on the character and circumstance. All right. Okay, I was just wondering, in Rift's 19... well, this is for Heathen Dog. In Rift's England, the god Dagda has a horror factor 19, but in Pantheons, practically none of the gods have a horror factor above 18. I mean, how scary is a crazy old man? Yeah, 20. Okay. Those who know him or of him tend to find this crazy old man extremely scary. Pray you never have to learn why. But you know what this doesn't answer? He has a horror factor of 19. Isn't that effectively the same as an 18?
No.
I thought, Max, you could roll. I thought 19 or 20 always succeeded.
No, a 20 always succeeds. A natural 20 always succeeds, but you can have bonuses. There are lots of OCCs and races that have bonuses to their horror factor roll. So you could roll a 17, but have a +2 and make 19.
So what was the deal with mine being 22, but effectively an 18?
Well, the thing is, you can't have, according to Palladium rules, you cannot have a horror factor above 18.
Okay.
Now, this is a narrative exemption. This guy apparently is so scary that he, above all else, gets a 19. No one else does.
Okay, fair enough. And I don't have a problem with that because this is not a player character, so.
No.
What are the horror factors of dragon hatchlings in the Rifts main Rifts book? Fire hatchling 12, great horned hatchling 12, ice hatchling 10, and thunder lizard hatchling. Hatchling 11. Lizard.
Ice hatchling is not as scary as his brothers.
What does he do? Make you shiver?
I guess.
You know what? That's okay. He's not as scary, and so you underestimate him. Now, this question's for me.
Okay.
How do you determine the horror factor of cyborgs and robots? What do I like to play in Rifts?
Cyborgs and robots. Or cyborgs.
Well, yeah. Most Borgs and bots do not have horror factors. However, if it is designed to look like a monster, they'll have an equivalent horror factor as a comparable demon or dragon. Most will probably range from 9 to 13.
And this is actually written into, I believe it's either Japan or China, because they actually turn their Borgs into like scorpions and dragons and stuff.
That's gross.
And they have a horror factor.
Okay. I could see, I know I'm using wrong terms. I'm doing it for the purposes of imagination. I could see a Borg that looks like a Skelly bot to a mundane person, maybe not to another player character, but to a mundane person, having a horror factor as well. After seeing Skelelots run through and ransack your village or town or whatever, and then you kind of look like one, I can see that.
The easiest example is the movie Terminator. I mean, you could tell horror factor was involved in a lot of that, especially when, you know, his face was all cut up and he saw the red eye. Whenever someone saw that, they freaked out.
Yeah.
They lost their minds. You know why? Because cyborgs and robots are not common in 1985 normal place, right? Now, if you have a cyborg who goes into an environment where nobody has cyborgs, I'd say give him a horror factor. Easy. And range it between 9 and 13, just like this.
Be careful with player characters trying to abuse that. It would be my only thing. I'm not against it. I think it actually makes some sort of sense. But be careful with player characters trying to abuse stuff like that. All right. Last question. And I could have sworn I asked Heathen Dog this one, but okay. What is the chance a character will throw up when exposed to extreme horror or obscene smells? For example, a putrefying body in a sweltering house, being immersed in raw sewage. Yum. Good question. Against physical sensations like smell and revulsion, it could be the same thing as safe versus non-lethal poison, 16 or higher. Or it could be the same horror factor number as the creature responsible for the smell or horrific image. If you think that a number is too high, maybe 14 or 12, go with whichever you think works best for you. A failed roll, I do that a lot. It's 50-50 chance, so I'll make the horror factor 11. Roll 11 or higher and you win, roll 10 or less, and I like to do things like that. If the monster already has a number, you utilize that, but I'm talking for situations like that. It's 50-50.
I would use the next idea.
Okay. Go with that for a failed roll to save causes the character to throw up. This reaction is a mental gag, so the character should have to roll under his ME attribute on a d20 to avoid physically vomiting. My problem with that only stems from the fact that you can have a 24.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that. You are so mentally strong that you are not going to gag because of this revulsion bullshit. No.
Yeah, I get it, but I don't like automatic. If you're game, if you're, I wouldn't want it to be a D20. That's all I'm saying. Like in a game where stats are already inflated, I get what Heathen Dog's saying. It does make sense, and I'm sure somebody out there is going to argue for his point as well. I'm not against it necessarily. I just don't like it. If your attributes can go above what the die is that you're rolling, I'd rather not use that die. It's just. So I think I'd rather go with the saving throw or the horror factor check. But this is what's cool about Palladium. Do what works for you. Stopping oneself from the actual act may avoid a mess or being uncovered by the enemy, but is likely to turn the character green, and he still suffers the effect of the horror factor. He just doesn't hurl. So you're that person. Oh, I'm gonna vomit, but you didn't.
Yeah, but for the first 15 seconds, you are still basically combat ineffective.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is the one I asked Heathen Dog. And if you don't remember, I thought I asked you on Discord. Maybe I didn't. I thought I did, though. What penalties, if any, apply if you puke inside environmental armor?
We're all going to make fun of you forever.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Environmental armor is self-contained and is much like wearing a full-faced motorcycle helmet. So upchucking into the helmet is definitely not advisable or pleasant. If someone vomits... Oh, I thought this was the last question. Oh, my God, I was wrong. Okay, I thought that was the last question. There's a whole other page I didn't see. Inside a helmet, have to remove the helmet, or at least the faceplate to wipe it clean and be able to breathe properly. Until wiped clean, vision is impaired, and foul stench inflicts the following penalties upon the character. No initiative. You notice it doesn't say a penalty. It says what? No initiative.
Yeah.
-1 attacks per melee round. What does that mean if you have no initiative? -1 attacks per melee round. That means you lose an attack and you're acting last in every round.
Yep.
-8 to strike, -6 to parry and dodge and perform all their combat moves. A called shot or aimed shot is impossible, and skills are performed at -20%. When my skill doesn't require sight, you're still out of sorts. Stop it. Also, a visor or faceplate that pulls back cannot be slid open until the helmet has been removed and cleaned out properly. Penalties end as soon as the helmet is removed or the muck is wiped away. I hope you're not on a phase world planet that is nitrogen or not nitrogen. It says ammonia atmosphere. Cleaning takes at least 1 minute. How many rounds is that? Jeez, I almost knocked me. Clean takes at least 1 minute and has a horror factor of 9.
Oh, no, I wouldn't do that. It's your own vomit. It's different. No, I'm never doing that.
I might do that for a normal person. I'm not going to do that for a player character.
Anyway, I wouldn't use all these minuses. They seem too extreme for me.
Yeah, I would use a grading scale of it. Like, how badly did you puke in there? And so forth. But that gets really into the weeds more so than I might like. I do think that the concept, though, is important. But outside of that, yeah, I think the numbers are better off if a game master just kind of does what works best for his table. You know what I do like? I do like the no initiative and the -1 attack. I think the other stuff might be a bit too penalizing.
Yeah, a little too much for the other stuff, but yes.
And by the way, you can read the rest here. We're going to go to the next question. If a Nightbane's Morphus has a horror factor and he has something to increase the physical beauty stat, are one of them canceled out? Or do you simply have to successfully save his horror factor before a charm attempt based on the physical beauty can be done? Oh, I didn't even think about that. I was like, why would you? They shouldn't be together. But I guess, yeah, some of them can be so ugly and obnoxiously beautiful at the same time. All right. It's the weird thing about Nightbane. A save versus horror factor is required before attempting to charm them. After all, before their beauty can be used to affect the natural... I'm having a hard time seeing this. The repulsion caused by the horror factor must be overcome. By the way, the horror factor from a beautiful creature is a reflection of their souls, of their virile
soul leaking through their physical attractiveness.
I got a little tunnel vision or something going on here. It's actually really difficult for me to read this at the moment.
All right, I'll finish this then. An evil aura, if you will. You have all probably met someone who looked attractive enough, but whom you found disturbing, scary, or unpleasant due to their personality. It works something like that. See, for me, no, I would have it be, I would have the physical beauty, like seduction, especially if it's a like say a succubus or something. I would, if they fail the horror factor, I would have the seduction be more effective because your normal mental defenses are down. You're freaking out and suddenly it's comforting you. It's coming on to you. It's trying to relieve you. And in your horror factor state, you're going to reach out to anything that looks like a lifeline, even if it looks like that.
So here's an example. Not again, remembering that horror factor isn't always about something just being crazy, ugly, or whatever. It could be a startling event. I worked with a girl. I'm not going to mention her name, but even though this was like 30 years ago, I worked with a girl. She was smoking hot. Smoking hot. When they said that she was coming up to my office, I was like, oh, life is good for me. And then she opened her mouth. Worst case of halitosis that I have ever heard of or smelt or whatever. That was some horror factor. I'm telling you, she was smoking hot. And then she talked and you're like, oh, and you froze because you didn't know what to do. She was gross, at least in that regard. So something like that I could see being the dichotomy of physical beauty and then horror factor. And as far as amorphous form goes, yeah, I don't know enough about Nightbane, but personality. What kind of personality would you have to be so beautiful? I guess, okay, you know what? you're smoking hot and then you start sacrificing people. Okay, I guess I could see that.
Yeah, you start cutting open babies and eating entrails. It's gonna turn me off. Okay. Real hard. Like complete off switch. Reverse even.
On page 257 of Heroes Unlimited Second Edition, what's the horror factor for the thunderclap under altered atmospheric conditions? And does it also apply to the call lightning power on the opposite page? The thunderclap has a horror factor of 8. Like the spell of the other games, there is no horror factor for the call lightning, since the focus of the effect is not to frighten, but to do damage. Now, that's one of the things that's interesting about Magic in most games. I know you're probably trying to look at it in the scientific sense. Well, with lightning, there's a thunderclap, right? Yeah, but this lightning, look, you're going to get one effect out of it. You get the damage. You can have the thunderclap for the horror factor. You can have the lightning for the damage.
Yeah, Magic and Psionics and Palladium are not that all-encompassing, purposefully. A spell has an effect. It has some side effects, but that side effect is flavor. Its effect. Now, there are some supplements that you can add elemental effects to spells and stuff like that, but you have to make the spell, rewrite it. There's a lot of hoops you have to go through to get more than one effect out of a spell. It can be done, but it's specialized deal. It's not the normal stuff printed in there.
And especially since we're talking Heroes Unlimited, all that stuff is going to be baked into the power.
Yeah.
Can a vampire, that's right, I'm going to say it wrong just to get all the comments in there. They love it when I do this.
Got one of those too, yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah, you know.
Yeah, I got that.
I'm sorry, no, it's vampire.
Yep.
Vampire. Can a vampire character, bad idea already, turn another person into a vampire? No. They don't have enough of the vampire essence in them to be able to perform the slow bite of master and secondary vampires.
There you go. Good answer.
So don't play a vampire anyway. It's stupid. It has a dumb name. It's a vampire. Vampire.
Definitely get comments on that.
I don't care.
Good.
It's only dumb people that want to play crap like that. Can a vampire from Nightbane survive? Wait, is that amorphous form? I mean, I don't care if it's amorphous form, but
no.
Oh, okay, so that's a creature. All right. Can a vampire
it's half vampire, half human hybrid?
So it's a monster that you kill. Got it. It's not amorphous form.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Can a vampire from Nightbane survive on animal blood? And Ken said vampire ever gain super psionics? Yes, they can survive on animal blood, but the urge for humanoid blood. Oh, but the urge for humanoid blood. That seems like a sentence that they forgot to end properly. This means after drinking animal blood, seeing human blood may spark hunger, thirst, desire, and the need to drink.
Yeah, I mean, there are rules for vampires and these wannabe vampires, where when you're hungry, you're considered hungry. You have to make saves or whatever to see human blood and not immediately feed. Well, this one is saying, yeah, this particular half-breed vampire can subsist off of animal blood, but you're constantly going to be in a state of hunger when you see real human or humanoid blood. You're going to be considered in a state of hunger and have to roll appropriately.
Okay. Says they cannot learn psionics. And let me reread that first sentence there now that I can actually start seeing kind of appropriately again here. Yes, they can survive on animal blood, but the urge is for humanoid blood. I thought there's kind of like a comma in there or something where we're like, okay, the urge is for humanoid blood. What? I was just misreading. How do vampires fit into rifts? Are they MDC? And can they be created there? Conversion book. Do I actually have to read this? All right, let's find out.
No, because everything goes into rifts and has to be converted. So there you go.
Vampires are not common to Rift's Earth, though they may appear from time to time. The magical essence is much higher in Rift's Earth, preserving and strengthening the bond between the vampire intelligence and the character, especially if the intelligence is already on Earth, like Mexico.
Yep.
For those that bring vampires into Rift's Earth, the character remains an SDC being and requires MDC weapons and armor to avoid a quick death. That's interesting, because I thought that if you were already a magical beast, so to speak, I thought that magic was uptick to MDC.
It is, but vampires are different. Vampires are not MDC creatures. They are just immune to all damage. They only have hit points.
Okay.
They don't have MDC. So you're a half human, half this. So I get it worked out differently.
Okay. However, they do possess supernatural physical strength to their punches and kicks, but not bite. That'd be funny. Oh man, I broke another one. Which inflict mega damage. For those of you interested in vampires in Rift's Earth, you should take a look at. Nope.
You shouldn't be interested in vampires on Rift's Earth at all.
Although, if you go to last week's Rifter, where you can play the Soaker, that's right, a psychic that squirts water on people, then maybe you'll be interested in vampires.
The Palladium equivalent of a human Squirtle.
I know you can use Dimensional Rift to go from one dimension to the other, but can you also use one to go between places in the same dimension?
Yes. And we actually talked about that last week or the week before when I was talking about the shifter. The shifter has the ability to open a dimensional portal to the same plane and even the same planet. It's not going to be great accuracy, but you can do it.
Well, I won't read the first paragraph there because that's so self-explanatory and people can look at that on the screen. But the second one here says the spell Dimensional Portal, while intended for dimensional travel, can also be used to rift a character from one ley line nexus to another anywhere on the planet. So there you go.
Yeah, it costs 1,000 PPE, but you can do it.
Hey, you know what? If you got to go, you got to go.
I suppose so.
Such magic is also described Aliens Unlimited Galaxy Guide, practiced by the Elven Star Kingdom. Wow, stupid elves. All right, we're done. We end on elves. I totally did not. When I was going through this book, I totally did not see this page. Oops. So, all right, what do we have any comments there? Well, okay. Well, before you read that,
Digest every week finally reduced my horror factor to the show. That's great.
I don't know.
Oh.
Remember, after a while, the horror factor still comes back. We still surprise people.
There you go. Darthiek says, I also think that when good creatures have a horror factor versus evil creatures, it should be used as awe for good characters. And I agree. Now, yes. If the same thing should go for evil creatures and evil, the evil minions and shit. If there's a demon lord has a horror factor of 14, a minor demon of the same clan sees that, and for him, it's an awe factor of 14. Same thing for the Raphael, Angel of the Lord, comes down. He has an awe factor of 18. But to a demon, it's a horror factor of 18. But to good guys, it's still that awe factor of 18. Now, the thing is, awe factor and horror factor do almost the same thing. You're still like, for the first round, you're still stunned, just with a different side effect. Stunned, oh my God, this is the greatest moment of my life, and I had a little mini orgasm just then. Or stunned, oh my God, I peed myself. This is the scariest I've ever been in my life. The explanation is different, but the effect is the same. So technically, it doesn't matter.
I don't know if it's written in the rules. I haven't come across it, but again, I don't play some of the games where these rules are prominent. I would make it more situational, unless the rule said otherwise. I would make it more situational. The example of the Archangel Raphael, yeah, I agree with that. The demon thing, maybe not. To me, it would really depend. But I don't think that just simply because something has a horror factor, it has the equivalent awe factor to people of his own alignment. I think that's situational. In some aspects, like again, an Archangel just makes sense. Some just monstrous creature out there that's really ugly or really scary, whatever. I don't think that necessarily, or I don't think that necessarily has to compute to its opposite. But I don't know. I don't know. There might be a specific rule in the game, and if the rule in the game says no, horror factor equals awe factor of something of the equivalent alignment or equivalent stature, or, whatever, then I'd just go with what the rule said. Is that it?
That's basically it. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, that was a little longer than I thought because I completely missed a page. But I hope it answered all your questions about horror factor. It all seemed to make sense to me. I think a couple of them may have dove into the weeds a little too much, but what are your thoughts? Do you like these things? Do you think that sometimes people just ask dumb questions because, they have bad players at the table, or maybe it's a player at the table who has a bad game master and wants to get some clarification on something? I don't know. I'm always of the mindset that the game master should just make a ruling and move on. And as long as he's fair, consistent, and reasonable. I don't see a problem with whatever ruling he makes, but that's up to me. What are your thoughts? Did you learn something new from this horror factor? Or are we just scrubs who don't even know what we're talking about, and you just wasted 30, 40, however many minutes long this video is? I love those comments. Have a great day.